The artillery had been firing for 912 days when Colonel Erich Voss finally realized that every man in his regiment was already dead. He did not realize it because the guns had fallen silent. They had not. The guns of the 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment continued to thunder from the blackened trenches of St. Kharon's Reach, coughing shells into a horizon that had ceased to exist beneath smoke and ash. Earth shook beneath every discharge. Sandbags trembled. Rusted ammunition crates jumped against the mud. Great columns of soil rose beyond the wire where Imperial shells struck positions that had belonged to the enemy yesterday, might belong to the enemy tomorrow, and perhaps had never belonged to anyone at all. Voss realized the truth because Private Helmer removed his respirator. It was such a small thing, a ridiculous thing. Helmer had served as Voss's runner for 11 months. He was 17 standard years old, though like most soldiers of Krieg, his voice carried the flat exhaustion of someone 3 times that age. He never complained, never asked questions beyond what an order required, and never removed his mask outside a sealed bunker. Yet that morning, or what Voss believed was morning, Helmer stepped into the command dugout carrying a leather message tube, stopped before the colonel's map table, saluted, and pulled the respirator from his face. Voss looked up slowly. The boy had no face beneath the mask, not in the way shell fire removed faces. There was no blood, no exposed muscle, no broken bone. There was simply darkness, a hollow silhouette where flesh should have been, shaped like a human head but filled with something deeper than shadow. 2 faint points of gray light hovered where eyes might once have existed. Helmer seemed not to notice. "Dispatch from 3rd Battalion, Colonel." Voss stared at him. Helmer extended the message tube. The artillery thundered overhead. Dust drifted from the bunker roof. "Private." "Yes, Colonel. Your respirator." Helmer paused. He touched the mask hanging from one hand. For the first time, uncertainty entered his voice. "Apologies, Colonel." He placed it back over the darkness. Leather straps tightened around nothing. The shape beneath the mask became human again. Voss did not move for several seconds. Then he took the message. "Dismissed." Helmer saluted and left. The colonel waited until the footsteps faded. Then he turned toward the small cracked mirror bolted to the bunker wall. His own reflection waited for him. Gray greatcoat, black leather gloves, steel breastplate scarred by shrapnel, officer's cap, respirator, red lenses. He reached slowly toward the buckles. His fingers hesitated. Then he removed the mask. The mirror showed nothing beneath it, only darkness. 2 cold points of gray light stared back from inside the shape of his skull. Voss did not scream. Men of Krieg were not raised to waste breath on terror. He simply stood before the mirror, studying the impossible absence that had replaced his face. He attempted to remember what he had looked like. He could not. Brown hair, perhaps, or black. A scar beneath one eye. Maybe that had belonged to another officer. He remembered shaving before deployment, but not the sensation of the blade. He remembered drinking recaf, but not its taste. He remembered hunger, but could not recall the last time he had experienced it. The artillery fired again. The mirror shook. Voss replaced his respirator. Then he walked outside. St. Kharon's Reach spread before him. For almost 3 years, the 143rd had defended this place against the armies of the archenemy. The world had once been called Eshara. It had possessed oceans, forests, agricultural continents, manufactoria, 12 hive clusters, 4 pilgrim continents, and approximately 11 billion Imperial citizens. Then the cicatrix maledictum had torn reality apart across the stars. Warp storms swallowed Ashara. Communication with the wider Imperium vanished. Within weeks, cults rose in every hive city. Within months, demonic hosts walked beneath the open sky. Within a year, most of the planet belonged to chaos. Only St. Kharon's reach remained. A narrow valley between two ranges of volcanic mountains, guarding the entrance to the subterranean pilgrimage city of Kharon Sanctus. Deep beneath that city rested the bones of St. Kharon, martyr of the Angevin Crusades. Imperial command believed the enemy wanted the relic. The Death Corps had been ordered to prevent its capture. That was all. No evacuation order, no extraction plan, no reinforcement schedule. Hold St. Kharon's reach. Deny the enemy passage. Die if necessary. So they had. Again and again, Voss climbed from the command trench. The battlefield beyond looked exactly as it had the previous day. Mud, wire, corpses, burning wrecks, collapsed bunkers, crater fields disappearing beneath poison fog. The sky was the color of old blood. Artillery shells screamed overhead toward enemy positions several kilometers away. Along the Imperial trench line, Death Corps infantry moved with mechanical purpose. Men cleaned laser guns. Heavy weapons teams loaded ammunition. Engineers reinforced revetments. Medici orderlies carried stretchers. Officers studied firing charts. Nobody spoke unless necessary. Nobody noticed what Voss had discovered. Or perhaps they had. Perhaps they simply did not care. He walked toward the nearest firing step. A squad of grenadiers stood watching no man's land. Their uniforms were torn. Several were burned. One had a bayonet driven completely through his chest. The weapon protruded from his back. He appeared unconcerned. "Grenadier," the soldier turned. "Colonel, why is that bayonet still in you?" The grenadier looked down. He seemed to notice it for the first time. "Enemy weapon, sir. I can see that." "Yes, sir. Does it hurt?" The soldier thought about the question. "No, sir. Remove your respirator." The grenadier obeyed instantly. Darkness, gray lights, nothing else. Voss ordered the entire squad to remove their masks. 9 hollow faces stared back at him. One man lacked even the gray lights. Only a deeper blackness looked through the sockets of his respirator. "Trooper," Voss said. "Yes, Colonel. Can you see me?" "Yes." "How?" The trooper considered. "I do not know." "Replace masks." They obeyed. "Carry on." Voss returned to headquarters. Major Adler was waiting beside the map table. The major commanded the regiment's 1st Battalion. He had been hit by a plasma weapon 2 weeks earlier. Voss remembered seeing half his torso burned away. Yet Adler stood before him now, complete. His greatcoat was still blackened from the wound. "Colonel, Major!" "Enemy movement along Sector 7. Approximately 3 companies assembling behind the ridge. Prepare counter-battery fire." "Yes, sir." Adler began to leave. "Major," he stopped. "When did you die?" The question hung in the bunker. Adler showed no surprise. "Day 628, sir." Voss stared at him. "You remember?" "Yes." "How?" "I was struck by a plasma discharge during the assault on Redoubt Theta." "I remember." "Yes, sir." "And afterward?" Adler remained silent. "Major, I woke in the casualty station. Alive." "No, sir." Voss felt something colder than fear settle through him. "How many men know?" "All of them." "Why was I not informed?" Adler seemed confused. "We assumed you knew." "Why?" "Because you died before I did." Silence. Voss looked down at the map. His gloved hands rested against its edges. When? Day 512. How? Enemy artillery. Memories came slowly. A bombardment. The southern observation bunker. A roar. Stone collapsing. Someone shouting for medical support. Then, nothing. Afterward, he remembered waking in the command trench. He had believed he had merely been unconscious. He had never questioned why the medical officer could not find a wound. How long? Voss asked. Since your death? No. He looked at Adler. How long since the last living soldier remained in this regiment? The major answered immediately. Day 703. Voss looked toward the bunker entrance. Outside, thousands of dead men continued preparing for another battle. Who was he? Trooper Matthias Kelm, 2nd Battalion, 83rd Company. How did he die? Adler's voice did not change. Old age. Voss slowly turned. What? He was 19. Voss waited. Adler continued. He entered a dugout during bombardment. When the barrage ended, his squad found him dead. His body appeared approximately 90 years old. What did the Medicae report say? Natural causes. That is impossible. Yes, sir. And afterward? He returned during the next enemy assault. You mean his corpse rose? No, sir. Adler paused. He simply reported for duty. Voss left headquarters. He walked the length of the trench line. Men saluted. Officers acknowledged him. Nothing had changed, yet everything had. He began counting details he had somehow ignored. There were no ration lines. There had not been ration lines for months. Water purification crews still operated, but nobody drank. Medicae stations treated injuries that should have been fatal, but the wounded always returned. Supply depots never seemed too empty. Ammunition remained despite months without resupply. Fuel drums filled tanks that should have consumed them years ago. Artillery crews fired thousands of shells every day, yet stockpiles never diminished. Voss entered the main ammunition bunker. Shells stood stacked from floor to ceiling. He knew those shells. He recognized markings on their casings. He had personally watched several of them loaded into guns that morning. He took one from the rack, serial number 88-143-771992. Voss carried it to Battery 4. A Basilisk crew loaded a shell into their Earthshaker cannon. Serial number 88-143-771992. The same shell. The gun fired. Voss ran back to the bunker. The shell was waiting on the rack. He touched the cold metal. For the first time since childhood, Colonel Erich Voss felt something approaching dread. They were not surviving. They were repeating, but not exactly. The enemy changed. Battles changed. Men remembered. Orders arrived. Sometimes. That evening, Voss ordered every surviving officer, though the word surviving now felt obscene, to gather in the command bunker. 23 officers stood around the map. Voss removed his respirator. One by one, the others did the same. 24 hollow faces watched one another beneath the weak lumen lamps. "We are dead," Voss said. "Yes, Colonel," Major Adler replied. "Yet we continue fighting." "Yes. Does anyone know why?" Silence. Finally, Lieutenant Kruger, commander of the engineers, spoke. "We have orders. That explains why we fight. It does not explain why we exist." Kruger considered this. For Krieg, there is little distinction. Several officers nodded. Voss almost laughed. The sound would have been inappropriate. Instead, he looked toward Captain Meinhardt, regimental confessor. Unlike most priests attached to Death Corps formations, Meinhardt had been born on Krieg itself and trained beside the soldiers he served. His skull mask had been cracked down the center by a chainsword months earlier. Confessor. Yes, Colonel. Are we damned? Meinhard answered without hesitation. I do not know. You are a priest. I am artillery certified. Several officers looked toward him. Meinhard continued. My theological education is adequate for battlefield absolution, morale reinforcement, and identification of common heresies. The spiritual condition of an entire regiment continuing active service after confirmed biological death exceeds my training. Your opinion. The confessor lowered his head. I believe damnation would involve greater suffering. Lieutenant Kruger looked around the bunker. We are still on Eshara. Meinhardt nodded. Point conceded. Voss replaced his mask. Then we establish facts. Tomorrow every company will submit records of confirmed deaths, unusual events, memory discontinuities, and changes to the battlefield. Adler spoke. Enemy attack expected before dawn. Then submit afterward. And if we are destroyed, Voss looked at him. We will apparently submit afterward. At 03:17 hours the enemy attacked. They came through the fog chanting the names of dead gods. Thousands of traitor guardsmen rushed the wire behind corrupted tanks. Mutants followed. Demons crawled between shell craters. The Death Corps opened fire. Laser guns painted the night red. Heavy bolters tore men apart. Mortars dropped among the attackers. Earthshaker rounds exploded behind enemy lines. Voss watched from an observation bunker as the battlefield became fire. Range 2,400. Decrease 50. 2,350. Fire. Guns thundered. Enemy infantry disappeared. A demon climbed through the smoke. It stood 12 meters tall, shaped vaguely like a man whose flesh had been stretched around the bones of something much larger. Its face contained a vertical mouth filled with burning teeth. It stepped over the trench. Death Corps' infantry fired upward. The creature laughed. Then it looked down at them. Its laughter stopped. Voss saw the change. Demons rarely showed fear in ways humans understood. But this one did. It recoiled. Not from guns, from the soldiers. What are you? It whispered. A grenadier fired a melta weapon into its chest. The demon screamed. Not from pain, from recognition. No, it stumbled backward. You belong beyond the gate. Grenadiers advanced. The creature struck them with one enormous arm. Bodies flew apart. Limbs landed across the trench. The surviving soldiers kept firing. The daemon screamed again. You are claimed. A commissar climbed onto the firing step. He raised a power sword. For the Emperor. The Death Corps charged. The daemon fled. That frightened Voss more than anything else. Daemons did not flee from dead men. They consumed them, corrupted them, possessed them, tormented their souls. Yet the creature had looked upon the 143rd as though seeing something that should not exist. By sunrise, the attack had failed. 817 Krieg soldiers had been killed. By noon, 600 had returned. Some walked from casualty stations. Others emerged from trenches where their bodies had fallen. One simply climbed from a crater carrying his own severed arm. By evening, all 817 had resumed duty. The severed arm had vanished. Voss found the soldier cleaning his rifle. Trooper, Colonel, you lost an arm. Yes, sir. Where is it? The soldier inspected both arms. I appear to have recovered it. Do you remember dying? Yes. What happened after? The trooper paused. Nothing. described nothing. There was no sensation, no darkness, no light, no voice, no. Then how did you return? I heard the whistle. Voss froze. What whistle? The attack whistle. The soldier tapped the small brass whistle attached to Voss's greatcoat. When you ordered the counterattack, Voss had blown that whistle at 03:42 hours. You heard it while dead? Yes, Colonel. And I reported for duty. The investigation lasted 13 days. The reports filled 7 crates. Every soldier in the 143rd had died at least once, some dozens of times. Sergeant Falk of 6th Company had been confirmed dead 109 times. He remembered every death. He displayed no particular concern about them. The regiment's earliest confirmed post-mortem event had occurred on day 104. A soldier killed by mortar fire was seen standing watch 3 hours later. At the time, officers assumed reports had confused him with another trooper. More incidents followed. Death certificates contradicted personnel roles. Men buried in mass graves reappeared. Tank crews destroyed inside burn-in vehicles reported for duty the next morning. Eventually, commanders stopped documenting anomalies. There was a war to fight. The strangest reports concerned the battlefield itself. Positions shifted. Trenches returned after destruction. Ruined villages changed locations. Distances between landmarks varied. Some soldiers claimed they could walk east for 3 hours and return from the west. Others reported hearing artillery beneath the ground. Patrols sent beyond 12 kilometers from St. Kharon's reach always returned to the same trench line, regardless of direction. Most troubling were the stars. There were none. Not a single soldier could remember seeing stars since day 389. Voss ordered an expedition, 30 grenadiers, 2 engineers, 1 psycher from the regimental sanctioned cadre. Major Adler volunteered to command. Their objective was simple: walk south until they reached somewhere else. They departed at dawn. For 6 hours, Vox communication remained clear. At hour 7, Adler reported passing a destroyed Baneblade named Penance of Helica. The tank had been lost near the northern ridge 2 years earlier. At hour 9, they discovered the remains of an Imperial cathedral. No cathedral existed south of their position. At hour 12, Adler reported something impossible. We can see the trench line. Voss stood inside headquarters holding the Vox receiver. Behind you. No, Colonel. Explain. It is ahead. You walked south. Yes. Continue. For another hour, the expedition advanced. Then soldiers at the northern defenses shouted. 33 figures approached across no man's land. Adler's expedition. From the north. Voss watched them enter the trench. Adler climbed down. His uniform was covered in gray dust. You returned from the wrong direction, Voss said. Yes. Did you turn? No. Anything else? Adler hesitated. The cathedral. What about it? There were names carved into the walls. Whose? Ours. Voss said nothing. All of us, Adler continued. Every soldier in the regiment. Casualty memorial. No. Then what? Graves. The colonel stared through red lenses. The cathedral contained 22,000 graves. How many soldiers currently serve in the regiment? 21,983. Voss felt the arithmetic before Adler said it. 17 empty graves. Yes. Names. Adler handed him a sheet. Voss read. 16 soldiers. And Colonel Erich Voss. His grave was the last. Mine was empty. Yes. Did it have a date? Yes. Voss looked up. Adler's voice remained steady. Tomorrow. Voss ordered the cathedral investigated immediately. This time he went himself. 300 grenadiers accompanied him, along with engineers, Medicae personnel, Confessor Meinhardt, and the sanctioned psyker, a thin man named Osric who had spent most of the campaign trembling beneath a hood of brass restraints. They left the trench at 0500. The landscape changed within the first kilometer. The mud dried. Shell holes became shallow depressions filled with white ash. The volcanic mountains faded behind them, despite their enormous size. By the 4th hour, the men walked beneath a sky without clouds and without light. They cast shadows in every direction. Osric stopped. "Colonel, what? The dead are watching us." Voss looked around. Nothing moved. "Location. Everywhere. Useful." "No, Colonel. You misunderstand." Osric's breathing accelerated. "They are not around us." "Then where?" The psyker looked down. "Under us." Several soldiers glanced at the ground. Voss did not. "Continue." They reached the cathedral after 11 hours. It stood alone in a plain of gray dust, black stone walls, a tower without bells, no doors, no windows, only a rectangular opening descending into darkness. Voss led the regiment inside. The interior was far larger than the exterior. Rows of stone slabs stretched into the distance. Each carried a Death Corps name. Trooper Emil Vetter, killed day 136. Returned day 136. Trooper Johann Keller, killed day 188. Returned day 190. Sergeant Matthias Horn, killed day 203. Returned day 203. Thousands upon thousands. Every grave recorded multiple deaths. Sergeant Falk's marker required an entire wall. 109 dates, then 110. Falk stared at the newest inscription. "That has not happened yet," he said. Voss studied the date. "Tomorrow." "How?" "Unknown, Colonel." "Then try to avoid the indicated method." Falk read it. "Decapitation. Wear your helmet." "Yes, sir." The expedition moved deeper. 17 empty graves waited at the far end. Voss found his. Colonel Erich Voss. Below the name was no date of birth, no home world, no honors, only one sentence. "He will leave when the line breaks." Voss touched the letters. "Colonel," Meinhardt said quietly. "Yes." "There is scripture beneath." Voss lowered his lamp. Tiny words had been cut into the base. They were not ecclesiarchal scripture. They were military orders, hundreds of them, fragments from commanders across Imperial history. "Hold the bridge, delay the enemy, no retreat, protect the civilians, hold until relieved." Every sentence repeated in different languages and dialects. Some were older than the Imperium. Voss looked at the priest. "What does it mean?" Meinhardt stared at the inscriptions. "I suspect this place is not a cemetery." "Then what?" "A memory." "Of what?" The priest looked across the countless graves. "Every order a soldier died obeying," Osric screamed. The psyker fell to his knees. Blood ran from beneath his hood. Something moved behind the graves. A figure, a guardsman in ancient armor, then another, then hundreds. They stood silently among the tombs. Not Krieg, Cardian, Talon, Mordian, Praetorian. Regiments Voss had never seen. Regiments erased from Imperial records. A woman in a burned officer's coat stepped forward. "You should not be here yet." Voss raised his last pistol. "Identify." She laughed softly. Even dead, the 143rd's insistence on procedure seemed to amuse people. General Elia Verdun, 9th Vortessian Army, dead 4,000 years. Purpose: waiting. 4. My men. Voss lowered his pistol slightly. Where are they? Still dying. He considered the statement. That is inefficient. Time does not function here. So I have noticed. Verdun approached his grave. You are different. How? You brought the battlefield with you. Voss looked around. We brought 300 men. No. She touched the wall. The cathedral trembled. For an instant, Voss heard thousands of artillery guns. You brought the trench. He said nothing. Verdun looked toward his soldiers. The road is noticing you. What road? She smiled sadly. You will understand tomorrow. Can tomorrow be prevented? No. Can it be prepared for? Yes. How? Her expression changed. Do not let them remove your masks. Then every ghost in the cathedral vanished. The expedition returned to St. Kharon's Reach after 19 hours. They entered the trench from the east, despite having approached from the south. No one questioned it. Voss checked the chronometer. Only 7 minutes had passed. The next day, Sergeant Falk was decapitated. The death occurred exactly as the inscription predicted. A traitor sniper fired an explosive round through the neck joint of his armor during an enemy probing attack. Falk's head disappeared. His body remained standing for almost 3 seconds before collapsing. At 11:40, he reported for duty. Helmet intact, head restored. Voss found him in the ammunition trench. Sergeant. Yes, Colonel. You ignored my instruction. No, sir. You were decapitated. The helmet was insufficient. Understood. Voss examined him. Anything different this time? Falk hesitated. Yes. What? I saw something. The colonel's attention sharpened. Describe. A field. What field? Wheat. Voss waited. Continue. There was sunlight. No smoke. No artillery. Falk's voice became uncertain. There was a house. Someone was waiting. Who? I do not know. Did you approach? No. Why? I heard the guns. And returned. Yes. Did the person say anything? Falk remained silent for several seconds. She asked why we were still fighting. What did you answer? That the position had not been relieved. And? She cried. Voss looked at him. Do you know her? No. Then disregard until further evidence. Yes, Colonel. That night the enemy did not attack. For the first time in 926 days, the battlefield became quiet. No artillery, no distant gunfire, no screams, nothing. The silence was unbearable. Soldiers remained at firing positions. Gunners waited beside loaded weapons. Officers watched chronometers. At exactly midnight, every Vox receiver in the regiment activated simultaneously. Static filled the trenches. Then a voice spoke. Colonel Erich Voss. Every soldier heard it. Voss stood in headquarters. Identify. The voice repeated. Colonel Erich Voss. It sounded human, old, exhausted. Identify yourself. Long silence. Then, I am Captain Lucian Thane, Imperial Navy vessel Resolute Faith. Voss looked toward Adler. The major shook his head. Neither recognized the name. Provide authentication. The voice transmitted codes. They were Imperial, ancient but valid. Voss verified them against the command cogitator. Captain Thane, state position. The answer came after several seconds. Orbit. Every officer froze. Voss gripped the receiver. Repeat. We are in orbit above Ishara. Voss looked toward the bunker ceiling as though expecting to see the ship through kilometers of cloud. That is impossible. I assure you, Colonel, it is not. We have had no orbital contact for over 2 years. Silence. Then Captain Thane said something that changed everything. Colonel, According to Imperial records, Ashara was destroyed 143 years ago. Nobody moved. Voss listened to the static. Clarify. The planet was consumed by a warp anomaly during the 13th Black Crusade. No survivors were recorded. We are survivors. Another pause. No, Colonel. The captain sounded afraid now. We cannot detect life signs anywhere on the planet. Voss looked around the bunker. 24 masked officers stared back. Yet you hear us. Yes. Can you see our positions? We see ruins. Ruins? Your fortifications are visible, but what? They are old. How old? Approximately a century. Voss looked at Adler. The major whispered, 143. Voss returned to the Vox. Can you land? We have attempted. And? Every shuttle loses navigation lock below 40 kilometers. Instruments report contradictory altitudes. One craft descended for 20 minutes and returned to the hangar without turning. Exactly like Adler's expedition. Why are you here? The Astronomicon flickered. Voss waited. Captain Thane continued. Our astropath received a distress signal. Krieg military encryption. Your regimental identification. Content? Hold St. Kharon's reach. Voss felt the words strike harder than artillery. Who sent it? That is what concerns us. Who? You did. Silence. Voss remembered no transmission. What timestamp? Captain Thane answered. 47 years from now. Confessor Meinhardt made the sign of the Aquila. No one else moved. The Vox crackled. Colonel, there is something else. Proceed. Our astropath says the planet is not where it should be. Explain. Physical coordinates match Ashara. Gravitational mass matches. Orbital mechanics match. But in the warp, the captain struggled. It is elsewhere. Where? The answer came quietly. Near the boundary. What boundary? The Vox erupted with screaming. Not static. Screaming. Thousands of voices. Some human, some not. Then the signal died. Every lumen in the bunker went out. Outside, soldiers shouted. Voss climbed from headquarters. The sky had changed. The clouds were gone. Above St. Kharon's reach was not space. There were no stars, no moon, no darkness. Instead, an ocean of pale faces stretched across the heavens. Billions, perhaps trillions. Human faces, alien faces. Faces of things never born in the material universe. All staring downward. The regiment looked up. For the first time, Voss saw Death Corps soldiers hesitate. Then something moved among the faces. A shape larger than the sky. A hand, not flesh, not bone, a concept shaped like a hand. It reached toward Ashara. Every Vox speaker exploded with one command. Hold! The voice was not Captain Thane. Voss knew that voice. Every Imperial citizen knew it, or believed they did. The voice of command, the voice carved into statues and prayers, the voice imagined by soldiers dying beneath alien suns, the voice of the Emperor. Men fell to their knees. Confessor Meinhardt stood beside Voss. Was that him? Voss looked upward. I do not know. That answer may qualify as heresy. Then shoot me. Meinhardt considered. You would return. Likely. Then the administrative value would be limited. The hand descended. The faces in the sky screamed, and enemy artillery began firing. The battle returned. But the enemy was different. They no longer came as traitor soldiers. They came as the dead, Imperial dead. Guardsmen, civilians, space marines, sisters of battle, pilgrims, children. Billions of them walking through the fog. Some wore uniforms centuries old. Some belonged to regiments Voss recognized only from history books. Cadians, Mordians, Valhallans, Talern, Vostroyans. They walked without weapons. The Death Corps did not fire. An old Cadian officer approached the wire. Half his face was missing. He stopped. "Let us through." Voss climbed onto the firing step. "No, we are going home. This position is restricted." The dead officer smiled. "There is no position." Voss looked behind him. Trenches stretched away. "There is no war," the Cadian said. Voss looked toward the approaching multitude. "There is always war." The officer laughed softly. "You really are from Krieg. State purpose. We are crossing." Denied. "Colonel, do you understand where you are?" "No. This is the road." "What road?" "The road every dead soul walks." Voss felt Confessor Meinhardt beside him. The Cadian continued. "Some go toward light, some toward darkness. Most are taken by things waiting between." "And us?" "You never walked. Why?" "Because someone told you to hold." Voss looked toward the endless dead. "And the enemy." The Cadian's expression changed. "They are coming." "Who?" "Everything that feeds upon the road." A scream rolled across the horizon. Not one scream. Millions. Behind the dead souls, shapes emerged. Demons, but not armies. Predators. Things that hunted the dead between reality and whatever waited beyond it. Voss understood. St. Kharon's Reach was not a valley. Not anymore. Perhaps it had been once. Now it was a barricade. A trench dug across the path of the dead. And the 143rd stood between humanity's souls and the things that wanted them. The Cadian officer looked toward the approaching darkness. "You cannot stop them." Voss drew his last pistol. "That has never been a requirement." The officer smiled. "No." Then he stepped aside. The first daemon reached the wire. The 143rd opened fire. The battle lasted 17 years, or 17 minutes. Time no longer behaved. Regiments of dead men fought armies that had no names. The Death Corps died millions of times. Every time, whistles called them back. Artillery fired shells made from memory. Bayonets pierced creatures composed of hunger. Tanks destroyed centuries earlier rolled again beneath banners of ash. Voss watched soldiers vanish beneath demonic claws and return moments later through communication trenches. Each resurrection changed them. Not physically, something else. Their shadows grew darker, their eyelights became brighter, their voices became distant. They were becoming less human. Yet their discipline remained. That was enough. The dead souls behind them continued walking. Billions crossed the trench. Each one passed deeper toward whatever destination awaited beyond. Sometimes they spoke. A mother thanked a grenadier who had no memory of his own mother. A child handed Sergeant Falk a wooden toy. Falk carried it attached to his webbing. A dead space marine saluted the regiment. Voss could not identify his chapter. His armor was too damaged. "You hold well, mortal." Voss looked at him. "We are dead," the space marine considered. "Then you hold exceptionally well." The warrior carried a shattered power sword and fought beside 6th Company for what might have been 3 days. He killed demons without prayer, without rage, without fear. When the road called him onward, he stopped beside Voss. "I had brothers once. Most soldiers do. They are gone. Most brothers are." The Space Marine looked toward the Death Corps positions. "Your men are becoming something. So I have been told. Does that concern you? Will it reduce combat effectiveness? No. Then not presently." The Space Marine laughed. Perhaps that is why the warp cannot understand you. He walked into the pale distance and vanished. There were other visitors. A sister of battle with half her body burned away, fought for 42 assaults before moving on. She spent every pause between battles kneeling in prayer. Meinhardt eventually sat beside her. "Does he answer?" the confessor asked. She looked at him. "Sometimes." "What does he say?" "Hold." Meinhardt nodded. "That is consistent." A dead commissar from an unknown regiment attempted to execute 3 Krieg soldiers for failing to retreat from an untenable position. The soldiers stared at him. Voss arrived. "What is the charge?" "Insubordination." "Against what order?" "My order to withdraw." Voss looked toward the trench. "Was withdrawal authorized by regimental command?" "No." "Then your order was invalid." The commissar's expression hardened. "Colonel, those men would have died." "They already had." The commissar lowered his pistol. After several seconds, he said, "I dislike this regiment." "Noted." He remained for 6 months, or 6 seconds. Nobody could determine which. The road did not simply carry Imperial souls. Sometimes aliens passed. An Eldar warrior in cracked armor appeared among a procession of pale spirits. The Krieg raised rifles. The Eldar stopped. Voss approached. "State allegiance." The alien stared at him in disbelief. "I am dead." "That does not answer the question. Your species remains absurd beyond mortality." "Allegiance against what pursues me." "Temporary cooperation approved." The Eldar fought beside them. His weapon was not physical. Each shot removed a demon's memory of its own existence. After the battle, he stood beside Voss and watched the trench crews work. "You humans have made a fortress inside death." "Apparently. Do you understand how impossible that is?" "No. I envy you." "Why?" "Understanding would terrify you." Voss looked at the next enemy wave. "Then ignorance is tactically useful." The Eldar bowed. "Perhaps." He vanished into the road. The 143rd learned things no living Imperial commander had ever known. They learned that some demons wore the faces of saints. They learned that prayers could become ammunition if enough dying soldiers believed them. They learned that battlefield banners carried memories. They learned that a regiment could forget its home world but remember its parade ground drill forever. They learned that the souls of children moved more quickly along the road because they carried less guilt. They learned that traitors sometimes begged for protection from the gods they had served. Voss granted it when it did not compromise the line. Confessor Meinhardt protested the first time. "He worshipped chaos. He is unarmed. He murdered Imperial citizens." "Will allowing the demons to consume him restore them?" "No." "Then his past conduct is irrelevant to current defensive requirements." Meinhardt stared. "You realize most priests would call that heresy." "Most priests are not here." "Valid." The traitor cried when the Death Corps opened a path. No one mocked him. Krieg had little interest in moral theater, only duty. But the road also carried enemies more terrible than demons. One came without a shape. Every soldier near it forgot his name. Companies began losing cohesion. Orders vanished from memory. Voss watched troopers stare at their own weapons as though seeing them for the first time. He ordered every man to write his regimental number across his sleeves. The thing moved closer. Soldiers forgot how to reload. Artillery crews forgot range tables. Meinhardt forgot the Emperor. Voss himself forgot Krieg. For several minutes he knew only one fact: hold. He stood in the trench, repeating the word. Hold. A soldier beside him repeated it. Then another. Hold. The word spread. Thousands of dead voices. Hold, hold, hold. The creature recoiled. It could erase memory. It could not erase the order because the order no longer existed in any single mind. It existed in the regiment. The 143rd drove it back with bayonets. Afterward, Voss spent 3 days reconstructing his identity from personnel records. Colonel Erich Voss, commanding officer, 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment. Place of birth, Krieg. Age at deployment, 38. Age now, irrelevant. He read the file twice, then burned it. He had learned enough. Another enemy resembled a city. Towers walked on bone legs. Windows opened like mouths. Inside each window, soldiers saw the lives they might have lived. Sergeant Falk saw a farm. Lieutenant Kruger saw children. Adler saw himself as an old man seated beside a fire. Meinhardt saw a cathedral without war memorials. Voss saw nothing. The city stopped before him. Its windows flickered. Then all of them showed a single image. Rain falling on green grass. Voss stared. Something in him hurt. The creature whispered, "You could have had this." Voss raised his pistol. "Range?" The artillery observer beside him answered automatically. 1200. Fire for effect. The regiment destroyed the city. Afterward, Voss asked Meinhardt what he had seen. "A life in which I never became a priest. Better? I do not know. Then irrelevant. What did you see?" Voss looked at the mud. "Rain." Meinhardt waited. "That is all." "Yes." The priest said nothing further. For what might have been decades, the 143rd fought without relief. Then Captain Thane contacted them again. The resolute faith had survived. From the ship's perspective, only 6 hours had passed. "Colonel, Captain, we have discovered what is happening. Report. Ashara has become an anchor. For what? A breach between the Immaterium and something beyond it." Voss listened. "Our astropath believes your regiment is preventing the breach from widening. How? We do not know. Then your report is incomplete." The captain almost laughed. "You truly are Krieg. So I have been informed." Captain Thane continued. "There is a possibility of closing it." "How? Destroy St. Kharon's relic?" Voss went still. Their original mission had been to protect it. "Explain." "The saint's remains are acting as the anchor. His death created a psychic resonance. When the planet was consumed, that resonance became trapped between realities. If destroyed, the road closes, and the souls, they pass elsewhere. The demons, cut off. The regiment, silence." Voss repeated. "What happens to the regiment?" "We believe." The captain stopped. "Proceed." "You would finally die." Voss looked around headquarters. Maps, shell crates, old mugs nobody drank from. The command chair he never used. 143 years. Perhaps more. He felt no relief, only the need to assess. What probability? Unknown. Estimate. 60%. Unacceptable. "Colonel, we do not conduct strategic demolition on 60%. If you continue, the breach may expand. Probability. 87%. Time frame. Impossible to determine. Then we hold. Colonel, you cannot fight forever." Voss looked through the bunker entrance. Sergeant Falk walked past carrying ammunition. The wooden toy still hung from his belt. "We have evidence to the contrary." The captain was silent. Then, "There may be another option." Voss waited. "The relic could be moved." "Where?" "Into the warp." "How?" Our ship, Voss understood immediately. You intend to enter the anomaly. Yes, you will die. Probably. Crew? 6,800. Voss said nothing. Captain Thane continued. We are Imperial Navy, Colonel. That does not make the sacrifice tactically sound. No. What makes it sound? You. Voss frowned behind his mask. Explain. For 143 years, your regiment has prevented something from reaching humanity's dead. We have been listening to the souls crossing your battlefield. The captain's voice softened. My daughter passed through your lines 20 minutes ago. Voss remembered a young woman in civilian clothing. She had thanked a soldier near Sector 9. I see. She died 12 years before I was born. Voss did not understand. Neither, apparently, did Thane. Time is broken here, the captain said. But she knew me. Voss looked at the command map. Captain. Yes? Prepare your ship. They would move the relic. The operation required crossing territory. No living soldier had entered in more than a century. Kharon Sanctus lay beneath the mountains behind Imperial lines. The pilgrimage city had been sealed since the first Chaos invasion. Voss selected 3,000 grenadiers. All volunteered. That meant nothing. Death Corps soldiers volunteered for everything involving probable death. Major Adler joined. Confessor Meinhardt joined. Sergeant Falk joined, despite having no reason to be present. When Voss asked why, Falk showed him the wooden toy. The child asked me to return this. To whom? He did not specify. Voss nodded. Valid objective. They entered Kharon Sanctus through gates covered in scripture. Inside, the city was untouched. Thousands of candles burned despite no one tending them. Stone streets descended around enormous cathedrals. Statues watched from alcoves. Every statue had Voss's face. The soldiers noticed. Nobody commented. Deeper underground, the statues changed. They showed Adler, Meinhardt, Falk, ordinary troopers, each depicted as saints. Voss stopped before one showing Sergeant Falk standing over a mountain of demons. Sergeant? Yes, Colonel. Thoughts? Poor likeness. They continued. The deeper they walked, the stranger the city became. Buildings contained doors that opened into battlefields. One doorway showed a snow-covered world beneath green auroras. Another revealed a desert filled with burning tanks. A third opened onto a void ship corridor where dead crewmen floated in zero gravity. The Krieg ignored them. Their route led down, always down. At the 23rd level, they encountered civilians. Thousands waited in a plaza. They wore Kharon clothing. Some carried children, some bore wounds. Most looked confused. Voss halted the column. A gray-haired woman approached. Are you Imperial Guard? Death Corps of Krieg. Her face brightened. You came. We were already here. No. She looked behind him. You came back. Voss studied her. Name. Mara Vell. Civilian identification. She gave a number. Voss transmitted it to headquarters. 30 seconds later, the answer came. Mara Vell, citizen of Ishara, declared dead on day 27 of the invasion. Voss looked at her. You have been dead for approximately 140 years. Mara began crying. A child beside her asked, Does that mean we can go home? Voss had no answer. Meinhardt did. Yes, the priest crouched. You can go home. Where? Meinhardt looked toward the road of pale light visible between two cathedrals. There. The civilians began walking, one by one. As they passed the Krieg soldiers, many thanked them, others saluted, Some touched their coats. The Death Corps stood motionless. A young man stopped beside Voss. "My brother served in your regiment." "Name?" "Jonas Vell." Voss checked his memory. "Trooper Vell, 5th Company. Is he here?" "Yes." "Can I see him?" Voss transmitted an order. 7 minutes later, Trooper Jonas Vell arrived. He stopped before the young man. Neither spoke. The brother removed a pendant from his neck, their family symbol. Jonas stared at it. Then slowly, the Krieg soldier removed his respirator. Darkness looked back. The young man did not recoil. He embraced him. Jonas stood stiffly at first. Then his arms moved, for perhaps 5 seconds. A dead soldier remembered how to be a brother. When the civilian left, Jonas replaced his mask. "Trooper," Voss said. "Yes, Colonel." "Return to your unit." "Yes, Colonel." His voice sounded different, not weaker, human. They descended. At the center of the city stood the basilica of the final gate. Its doors were open. Inside waited St. Kharon, not bones, a man. He sat upon a stone chair wearing ancient Imperial armor. His eyes opened as Voss entered. "You took your time." Weapons raised. Voss lifted one hand. "Identify." "Kharon. The Saint. That is what they called me." "You are dead." "Yes. Join the regiment." The Saint laughed. It echoed through the basilica. "You cannot recruit everyone you meet, Colonel." "Why not?" "Because some of us have other duties." Voss approached. "Are you the anchor?" "Yes." "Can you be moved?" "Yes." "Will moving you close the breach?" "No." Voss's hand tightened around his pistol. "Captain Thane believes otherwise." "Kharon Sanctus was never the anchor." "What is?" The Saint pointed. "At Voss." The colonel did not move. "Explain." "When the world died, every soul was pulled toward the warp." Kharon stood. "I tried to stop it." "How?" "Prayer. Effective. Initially." The Saint smiled. "Then your regiment died." Voss waited. "Your orders were absolute. Your faith was absolute. Your acceptance of death was absolute. 20,000 men who believed their only purpose was to hold one line." Kharon stepped closer. "In the warp, belief has weight." Voss knew enough about chaos to understand. "You created us." "No." "Then who?" "You did." Silence. The first soldiers returned because their comrades expected them at their posts. Each resurrection strengthened the belief. Each death made the regiment more real. Kharon touched Voss's chest armor. Eventually, the 143rd stopped being men. "What are we?" "An order." The word echoed. "A military command given form." Voss looked back at his soldiers. "Then destroying you accomplishes nothing." "Correct." "Why did Thane's astropath believe otherwise?" "Because something lied." The cathedral doors slammed shut. Vox channels erupted. Captain Thane screamed, "Colonel, do not!" The signal died. St. Kharon looked upward. "It found your ship." "What?" "The thing that has been trying to cross." The basilica shook. Dust fell. Voss drew his pistol. "Name." Kharon's expression became grim. "It has many." "Designation." "The Carrion King." "That will suffice." The stone floor cracked. Darkness rose, not shadow. The same darkness that existed beneath the masks of the Death Corps. Voss looked down. For the first time, he understood. The darkness inside them was not emptiness. It was the battlefield. Every trench, every crater, every dead soldier. The entire war carried within each man. The Carrion King emerged. It wore millions of faces. Every soldier the 143rd had failed to save. Every civilian killed on Ashara. Every soul taken by demons. Its body filled the basilica. Colonel Erich Voss. Voss raised his pistol. Identify. The creature laughed. Even Kharon looked surprised. You ask my identity. Standard procedure. I am the hunger beyond death. Hostile. Yes. Voss fired. The last bolt struck one of its faces. The basilica exploded into battle. Grenadiers opened fire. The Carrion King tore through them. Men vanished, returned, charged again. Adler planted melta charges against its limbs. Meinhard shouted prayers while firing a shotgun. Sergeant Falk climbed the creature using a bayonet. Voss fought toward Kharon. How do we kill it? You cannot. Unacceptable answer. You hold it. For how long? Forever. Voss paused. That was acceptable. Then the Carrion King spoke through every face. You are tired. Voss fired again. No. You have fought longer than your Imperium remembers. Correct. Your world is gone. Correct. Your families are gone. Likely. Your duty is meaningless. Voss reloaded. Incorrect. The creature stopped. For the first time it seemed confused. There is no one left to give you orders. Voss looked toward it. The order was already given, the Carrion King screamed. The regiment answered with bayonets. Across St. Karen's Reach, every soldier heard Voss's command. Fix bayonets! 20,000 blades locked onto rifles. The dead advanced. The Carrion King tried to retreat. There was nowhere to retreat. The trenches were inside the soldiers. The battlefield expanded. Mud spread across the basilica. Wire erupted from stone. Artillery positions appeared among cathedral columns. The 143rd transformed reality around itself. Earthshaker guns materialized. Crews loaded shells. Voss raised his sword. Fire. The basilica became sunlight. When vision returned, the Carrion King was still there. Wounded, smaller, furious. It had lost half its faces. The remaining mouths screamed curses in languages that hurt to hear. You think discipline makes you eternal? Voss walked toward it. No. Then what? Logistics. The Carrion King hesitated. Voss pointed behind it. The regiment's artillery had reloaded. The creature turned. Thousands of guns fired. This time the blast did not strike its body. It struck its name. The concept of the Carrion King fractured. Pieces of identity tore away. Predator, hunger, king, carrion. Each shell destroyed another certainty. The thing shrank. It became a daemon, then a man, then a child, then a shadow. Finally, it became nothing more than a whisper. I will return. Voss stepped onto the whisper. No, it vanished. So did St. Kharon. For several seconds there was only smoke. Then the soldiers stood in a trench, not beneath Ashara, somewhere else. Above them burned stars, real stars. Voss stared upward. He had forgotten how beautiful they were. Captain Thane's voice returned. Colonel, report. We have visual contact. With our position. With you. Voss turned. Above the trench hung the resolute Faith, not in orbit, in the same impossible landscape. Its hull was torn open. Ghostly figures stood along its decks. Captain, Voss said. Yes. Your ship appears destroyed. Yes. Crew status. Dead. Operational capability. A pause. Apparently unchanged. Voss considered. Welcome to the regiment. Thane laughed. This time Voss allowed himself to understand why. The road had changed. With the Carrion King defeated, the endless dead were gone, but the breach remained. Beyond the trench stretched an infinite plain. Across it came other things. Not demons, something worse. Things that lived outside the warp. Things even chaos feared. The first approached on 6 legs. It had no soul, no psychic presence, no true body. Reality simply failed wherever it stepped. Confessor Meinhardt examined it through magnoculars. "Colonel, yes, I have reviewed my theological education, and there is nothing about this. Then classify it as enemy. Efficient." Voss raised his whistle. Behind him, 20,000 Death Corps soldiers prepared weapons. Above, the dead Imperial cruiser turned its guns. St. Kharon appeared beside the colonel. Voss looked at him. "You survived." "I am a saint." "Useful." Kharon stared across the plain. "You understand now?" "No." "This is why you were kept." "By whom?" The saint looked upward. Far beyond the stars, something golden flickered. Voss saw a throne, or imagined one, a corpse, a king, a prisoner, a god, perhaps all. "He cannot protect every road," Kharon said. Voss watched the approaching enemy. "So he assigned one." Kharon nodded. "To you." Voss removed his whistle. "How long must we hold?" St. Kharon smiled. "Until mankind no longer needs the road. That may take some time." "Yes." Voss placed the whistle between his teeth. The 143rd waited. Across the impossible horizon, armies gathered. Creatures from dead universes, predators of souls, things born before the warp, things waiting for humanity to weaken. They saw a single trench, a ruined cruiser, 20,000 dead soldiers, and one colonel wearing a gray coat and black respirator. They advanced. Voss blew the whistle. The Death Corps charged. Centuries passed. Then millennia. The Imperium changed. Primarchs returned. Primarchs fell. Worlds burned. New crusades crossed the stars. Nobody remembered the 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment. Records vanished. Names faded. St. Kharon's reach became myth. Eventually, even Krieg forgot them. But sometimes dying guardsmen heard artillery where no guns existed. Sometimes a soldier falling beneath tyrannid claws saw gray-coated figures standing beyond the battlefield. Sometimes Imperial saints spoke of a trench beneath the stars. And sometimes demons whispered of the soldiers who could not be eaten. The regiment changed. Their uniforms became symbols rather than cloth. Their rifles fired memory rather than light. Their artillery shells exploded with the accumulated fury of every human soldier who had died holding a hopeless position. Their tanks became larger inside than outside. Their trenches appeared where needed. A firing step on Cadia, a bunker beneath Armageddon, a shell crater on a nameless moon. Whenever human soldiers died refusing to retreat, part of St. Kharon's reach touched their battlefield. The living rarely noticed. A guardsman might discover an ammunition crate where none had been moments earlier. A wounded officer might hear a Krieg voice over a dead Vox channel. A company surrounded by orcs might find a trench behind them that had not existed at sunrise. Sometimes the dead fought openly. More often they did just enough. One shell, one warning, one additional minute. The minute required for reinforcements. The second required to close a blast door. The shot required to kill a champion. The 143rd became a rumor woven through the wars of mankind. On Cadia, during the final hours before the world broke, Sergeant Falk stood beside a Cadian lieutenant. The lieutenant had lost one arm. Blood soaked his uniform. Black Legion forces advanced through the ruins. "Who are you?" the Cadian asked. "Sergeant Falk, 143rd Krieg." "Never heard of you." "Expected." "Are you reinforcements?" "No." "What are you?" Falk considered. "Delayed support." The Cadian laughed despite himself. The Black Legion charged. Falk fixed his bayonet. Behind him, shapes emerged from smoke. Krieg soldiers, hundreds, then thousands. They fought until the pylon fields collapsed. When Cadia cracked, the dead regiment stood on fragments of the world floating in space. The Cadian lieutenant stared at the impossible stars. "We failed." Falk looked at him. "You held. The planet is gone. The order was to hold. We did." "Yes. Then why does it feel like failure?" Falk had no answer. He was Krieg. Success and survival had never been closely related. The lieutenant's soul began to fade toward the road. He saluted Falk. "Tell them Cadia stood." Falk returned the salute. "They know. On Armageddon, the regiment encountered orcs in death. This created complications. Dead orcs did not behave like dead humans. They fought constantly. A warband of deceased greenskins discovered St. Kharon's Reach and immediately attacked because the trench looked difficult to capture. The battle lasted an estimated 70 years. Neither side achieved anything. Eventually, Voss met the orc war boss in no man's land. The creature was enormous, half-transparent, covered in scars. "You lot is dead," the war boss said. "So are you." "Yeah." "Then why are you attacking?" "Good fight," Voss considered. "Do you intend to cross the road?" "Nah." "Do you intend to cease attacks?" "Nah." "Can you be redirected?" The orc scratched its jaw. "Where?" Voss pointed toward a distant swarm of entities from outside reality. "They are stronger than us." The war boss stared. A grin spread across its face. "Really?" "Yes." The orcs never attacked St. Kharon's Reach again. They became a mobile problem for everything else. Meinhardt called it diplomacy. Voss called it target allocation. On another battlefield, they encountered Tyranids, not dead Tyranids. Something left behind when the hive mind withdrew. A psychic shadow shaped like hunger. It consumed entire stretches of the road. Human souls vanished within it. Voss committed the full regiment. For the first time in thousands of years, the 143rd nearly broke. The shadow did not kill them. It erased their connection to one another. Companies vanished. Artillery batteries disappeared. Men stopped returning after death. Voss watched numbers decline. 20,000, 17,000, 13,000, 8,000, 4,000. Major Adler stood beside him. "Colonel, yes. If current attrition continues, regiment will cease to exist in approximately 40 minutes. Then current attrition will not continue. Recommendation." Voss looked at the shadow. "What does it consume?" "Individual psychic presence." "And what are we?" Adler understood. "Not individuals." Voss transmitted one order. "Regiment, close formation." Every remaining soldier gathered. Infantry, artillery crews, engineers, tankers, officers. They abandoned trenches, abandoned guns, abandoned defensive spacing. Thousands stood shoulder to shoulder. The Tyranid shadow descended. Voss removed his mask. The others did the same. Thousands of hollow faces became one darkness. The shadow entered them, then realized too late that the darkness was not empty. Inside the regiment waited every battle they had ever fought, every artillery barrage, every bayonet charge, every death, every order. The hive mind's remnant tasted Krieg. It recoiled. For one impossible instant, Voss felt the attention of something vast. The true hive mind, far away, across galaxies. It noticed the 143rd, and disliked what it saw. The shadow fled. The missing soldiers returned. Adler replaced his mask. "Effective, yes. Do you believe the hive mind will remember us?" Voss looked toward the stars. I hope not. For the first time, something resembling humor entered Adler's voice. Agreed. They fought creatures from dead timelines, human empires that had never existed, machines that remembered futures where mankind was extinct, demons who claimed to know the Emperor's true name, angels that insisted they predated humanity. Voss classified all according to threat: hostile, potentially hostile, temporarily useful, irrelevant. He refused every offer of enlightenment. One entity promised to explain the universe. Voss asked whether the explanation would improve artillery accuracy. The entity said no. Voss ordered it removed. Another promised resurrection. We already possess that capability, Adler informed it. A third offered immortality. Meinhardt laughed so hard he had to sit down. The regiment became increasingly difficult to tempt. Chaos discovered that promises were ineffective against soldiers who wanted nothing. No wealth, no pleasure, no recognition, no forgiveness. Even absolution had limited appeal. A daemon of Slanesh once whispered to Voss that it could restore every sensation he had lost: taste, warmth, touch, love, rain. Voss listened, then asked, "Cost?" "Only surrender." He shot it. Later, Meinhardt asked whether the offer had tempted him. Voss looked at the wooden horse now hanging from his own belt. "Yes." The priest was surprised. "You admit that. It is a tactical fact. Why refuse? The cost exceeded the benefit." Meinhardt nodded slowly. "Colonel, I believe that may be the most Krieg answer to temptation ever recorded. Record it if useful." Sergeant Falk still carried the wooden toy until one particular day, or year, or millennium. The child who had given it returned. He walked across the battlefield between engagements. Falk recognized him. "You gave me this." "Yes." The sergeant removed the toy. "I was instructed to return it." The child shook his head. "It wasn't for me." "Then for whom?" The child pointed toward Voss. Falk approached the colonel. "Sir." "Yes." He handed him the toy. Voss stared. A small wooden horse, crude, paint faded. "Purpose," the child answered. "To remind you." "Of what?" "That you were human." Voss stood very still. He could not remember his childhood, could not remember his parents, could not remember Krieg before the regiment, could barely remember having a face. But when he held the wooden horse, something returned. Rain, not acid rain, real rain, a training field, a woman's voice, warm bread, a dog. He had once seen a dog. A memory surfaced. He was 6, perhaps 7. He stood beneath a concrete shelter while rain fell beyond the roof. Another child had carved the wooden horse. A girl, his sister. Voss did not remember her name, but he remembered her hands, small, dirty, holding the toy. "You always look angry," she had said. "I am not angry." "You look angry." "I am thinking." "About what?" "War." She laughed. Even as a child, he had been thinking about war. Voss returned to the present. The dead child watched him. "Do you remember now?" "Some." "That is enough." The child smiled and continued along the road. Voss attached the toy to his belt. Sergeant Falk nodded. "Better there." "Yes." Neither discussed it again. Then after 10,000 years of war, the order changed. The Vox activated. One voice, weak, ancient, almost gone. "Colonel Erich Voss." Voss stood. Every soldier froze. They knew the voice. "Receiving." The golden light beyond the stars flickered. St. Kharon's reach, static. Voss waited. "Has fallen." The regiment did not move. Voss felt something he had not felt since discovering his own death. Uncertainty. "Clarify." The voice returned. "The material world. Static. Terra. Long silence, then one final command. Return. The signal ended. Major Adler approached. Colonel? Yes. Our orders? Voss looked across the battlefield they had held for longer than civilizations existed. For the first time, the line no longer mattered. The enemy had stopped advancing. They sensed something worse than the regiment, something happening in reality. Voss turned toward the resolute Faith. Captain Thane, receiving. Can your ship move? Where? Terra. Silence. Then, Colonel, Terra is on the other side of death. Voss looked at the trench. So are we. The dead cruiser turned. A road opened. Not through the warp. Through every battlefield humanity had ever known. The 143rd marched. They passed Cadia as it broke. They passed Armageddon beneath burning skies. They passed ancient Terra during the siege. They passed worlds whose names had not yet been spoken. Every battlefield contributed soldiers. Not permanently. Just long enough. Dead guardsmen joined the column. Astartes walked beside Krieg infantry. Sisters carried broken banners. Titans appeared as enormous shadows. Humanity's wars became one road. The march lasted an eternity and no time at all. Along the way, Voss saw the Imperium as no living person could. He saw its birth in fire. He saw the Great Crusade. He watched human armies reclaim worlds from darkness. He saw betrayal, the heresy, brother killing brother beneath banners that would become legends. He saw the Emperor carried to the Golden Throne. He saw 10,000 years collapse into a single endless war. There were victories, thousands, millions. Yet every victory merely purchased the next battlefield. Voss understood why the dead road had become so crowded. Humanity had never stopped feeding it. At one point they marched beside an army wearing armor Voss did not recognize. The soldiers carried Aquilas, but their weapons were unfamiliar. Their commander approached. "What year is this?" Voss asked. The officer laughed. "No one knows. Imperial designation. Imperium Sanctus. Current enemy? All of them." Voss nodded. "Situation normal." The officer stared. "Your Krieg?" "Yes. I thought you were a myth. So have we." They marched on. Eventually the road narrowed. The stars vanished. Ahead burned one world. Terra. But not the Terra Voss remembered from history. The Imperial Palace burned. The Astronomicon was dark. Enemy fleets covered the sky. Golden towers collapsed. Billions fought through streets. The final battle had come. Voss did not know the date. It did not matter. The 143rd emerged beneath the walls of the Imperial Palace. Living soldiers saw them. Some screamed, some prayed, some fired. Bullets passed through gray coats. A wounded guardsman stared at Voss. "Who are you?" Voss looked toward the palace. "Reinforcements." The soldier began laughing. Voss did not understand why. The regiment deployed. It happened instinctively. Engineers dug trenches through marble courtyards. Artillery crews established firing positions beside statues of saints. Grenadiers reinforced gates. Dead tank crews emerged from shattered vehicles and began repairs. Living defenders watched in confusion. A young lieutenant approached Major Adler. "Sir, those trenches weren't there 5 minutes ago." "They are now." "How?" "Engineering." "That isn't engineering." Adler looked toward Lieutenant Kruger, who was directing men as a trench extended itself through solid stone. "Lieutenant," Kruger shrugged. "Advanced engineering." The living lieutenant decided not to ask further questions. The palace gates opened. A single custodian stood there. His armor was broken. Blood covered his guardian spear. He looked at the regiment. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then the custodian lowered his weapon. "Colonel Voss, you know me?" "Yes." "From where?" "The master of mankind spoke your name once." Voss waited. "When?" 10,000 years ago." "What did he say?" The custodian looked toward the burning palace. "He said you would be late." Voss considered. "Traffic." The custodian stared. Major Adler turned slightly away. Confessor Meinhardt made a sound that might have been coughing. The custodian laughed. It was an extraordinary sound. Then he stepped aside. "He is waiting." Voss entered the Imperial Palace. His regiment followed. Not all. Most deployed immediately to defensive positions. Because that was what soldiers did. Voss, Adler, Meinhardt, Falk, and 20 grenadiers continued toward the throne room. They passed dead custodians, burned banners, broken statues, mountains of enemy corpses. They passed rooms where reality had failed. In one chamber, stars hung beneath the floor. In another, 10,000 versions of the same battle occurred simultaneously. They crossed a corridor defended by one wounded Sister of Silence. She looked at Voss. Her eyes widened. She could not sense souls, yet she sensed them, not as people, as absence arranged into military formation. She signed a question. Meinhardt understood enough battle sign to translate. "What are you?" Voss answered. "Imperial Guard." The sister stared, then smiled. They continued. Near the inner sanctum, they encountered demons. Hundreds poured through a shattered gate. The custodians had fallen there. Voss raised his pistol. His grenadiers fired. The demons charged, then stopped. They recognized the regiment. One whispered, "The trench." Another stepped backward. "No!" Voss advanced. The demons fled deeper into the palace. Sergeant Falk watched them go. "Should we pursue?" "No." "Why?" "They are moving toward the objective." "The throne." "Yes." Falk understood. "Then we pursue." "Correct." They fought through corridors that had not known enemy footsteps since the heresy. Every meter cost lives. For the living, not for Krieg. The dead regiment absorbed attacks meant for custodians. Men were torn apart. Returned, burned, returned, erased, returned. One grenadier was struck by a weapon that removed him from history. For 3 seconds nobody remembered him. Then he appeared beside Voss. "Report. Temporary absence, Colonel. Duration. Unknown. Combat capable. Yes. Continue." At last, they reached the Golden Throne. Voss had expected brilliance. Instead, he saw a dying machine, cables, ancient metal, flickering lights, and a figure upon it. The Emperor. The corpse looked smaller than statues claimed, older than history. Yet when Voss entered, the skull moved. 2 eyes opened, golden, not gray. Voss saluted. "Colonel Erich Voss, 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment, reporting." The Emperor looked at him. No psychic thunder. No divine revelation. Just a tired voice. "You held." "Yes. Longer than ordered. We received no relief." A faint smile touched the corpse's face. "No." Voss waited. "New orders." The Emperor looked beyond him. At Adler, Meinhardt, Falk, at the thousands outside, at every dead soldier who had refused to abandon the line. "Yes." Voss stood straighter. "State objective." The Emperor raised one skeletal hand. He pointed toward the palace gates. "Humanity." Voss waited for clarification. None came. "Enemy?" The Emperor's eyes burned brighter. "Everything else." Voss nodded. "Understood." He turned, then stopped. "Lord." "Yes." "Duration?" The Emperor looked almost amused. Until relieved, Voss saluted again. That caused difficulties last time. For one impossible second, the Emperor of Mankind laughed. Then Colonel Erich Voss walked back toward the war. Outside the palace, the 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment formed ranks. 20,000 soldiers. Millions of ghosts behind them. Artillery rolled into position. The resolute faith descended through burning skies. Living defenders watched the dead take their places along the walls. Major Adler approached. Enemy forces number approximately 900 million. Noted. Additional demonic formations translating into the Palace District. Noted. Orbital supremacy lost. Noted. Probability of successful defense statistically negligible. Voss looked at him. Major. Yes. Have statistics ever stopped this regiment? No, Colonel. Then why mention them? Completeness of report. Approved. Voss climbed onto the wall. Below stood the final armies of mankind's enemies. Chaos, Xenos, things beyond classification. Creatures from the road. All drawn to Terra, all sensing the Emperor's weakness. They had come to end humanity. They expected exhausted defenders. They expected broken armies. They expected mortals. Instead, they saw trenches appearing across the palace grounds. Mud spreading over marble, barbed wire erupting from sacred plazas, gun emplacements materializing along walls, dead artillery crews loading weapons that had not existed for 10,000 years. The final enemy army hesitated. Voss watched through red lenses. He removed the wooden horse from his belt. For a moment he remembered rain. Then he placed it safely inside his coat. He drew his sword. Confessor Meinhardt stood nearby. Colonel, yes, I believe I finally understand our spiritual condition. Report. We are not damned. Good. We are not saved either. Acceptable. We are. The priest searched for the word. Deployed. Voss nodded. That sounds correct. The enemy began moving. Voss lifted his whistle. Behind him, thousands of Krieg soldiers fixed bayonets. Living guardsmen joined them. Custodians lowered guardian spears. Space Marines raised bolters. Civilians carried rifles. The final defenders of Terra stood beside soldiers who had been dead longer than most Imperial institutions had existed. The enemy charged. Voss blew the whistle. The sound carried beyond Terra, beyond the warp, beyond death, across every battlefield where a human being had ever died refusing to surrender. And the dead answered. They rose from Cadian ruins, from Armageddon ash, from nameless moons, from forgotten trenches, from ships drifting between stars, from mass graves beneath alien worlds. Not resurrected, not truly. Just called back for one final duty. Humanity had spent 10,000 years feeding its sons and daughters into war. Now war returned them. The sky filled with ghosts, billions. The enemy stopped. For the first time in the long nightmare of the 41st millennium, chaos understood what mankind had created through endless suffering. Not victory, not salvation, a reserve army. The first demonic wave struck the palace walls. It broke. The second reached the trenches. It vanished beneath artillery. The third came with titans. Dead engines answered. War machines destroyed thousands of years earlier appeared beside the palace. Lehman Russ tanks, Baneblades, Macarius heavy tanks. Vehicles whose patterns had been lost before Voss was born. Each bore damage from the battle that had killed its crew. Each gun still worked. Captain Thane's dead cruiser opened fire from the atmosphere. Lances struck enemy vessels. The resolute faith should not have been able to maintain orbit. It had no functioning engines. Half its hull was missing. Reality objected. The ship ignored reality. "Colonel," Thane transmitted. "Yes. We have incoming battleships. Can you stop them?" "No." Voss waited. Thane continued. "But we can ram them." "Approved. Thought you'd say that." The resolute faith accelerated. A dead ship crewed by dead sailors struck the largest enemy battleship amidships. The explosion became a second sun. Minutes later, the resolute faith returned. Voss looked upward. "Captain, yes, you were destroyed. Again. Any damage? Difficult to determine. Continue." "With pleasure." The battle spread across Terra. The 143rd could not be everywhere. So the road opened. Fragments of St. Kharon's Reach appeared wherever defenders were close to breaking. At the Lion's Gate, at the Eternity Wall, beneath the Himalayan catacombs, across the orbital plates, in the tunnels beneath the Imperial Palace. Living soldiers fell back into trenches that had not existed seconds before, and found Krieg soldiers waiting. One officer demanded authority. A Death Corps lieutenant handed him a firing schedule. The officer stared. "What is this?" "Artillery support." "We have no artillery." The horizon exploded. The lieutenant looked at him. "You do now." The living learned quickly. Do not ask where the Krieg came from. Do not ask how many times they had died. Do not remove their masks. And if a Krieg officer told you to enter a trench that was not there yesterday, enter it. The trench would probably be safer than reality. Voss moved from sector to sector. He fought, commanded, died, returned. At one point, a demon prince crushed him beneath a hammer. He woke in a trench 30 meters away. Private Helmer stood beside him. "Colonel, status, you were dead for 28 seconds. Unacceptable delay." "Yes, Colonel." "Enemy," Helmer pointed. The demon prince was still fighting. Voss drew his sword. "Resume." He charged. The demon prince saw him return. "What are you?" Voss had answered that question too many times. "Busy." He killed it with artillery. Hours became days. Days became impossible. The Emperor's light flickered. Every time it dimmed, the enemy surged. Every time it strengthened, the dead became more solid. Voss began to understand. The regiment was not merely helping the Emperor. The Emperor was helping them remain. A connection existed between the Golden Throne and the road. Perhaps it always had. Perhaps every Imperial soldier who died believing in him had contributed some fragment to the light. Meinhardt reached the same conclusion. "If he dies," the priest said, "we may disappear." Voss checked his pistol, "Then prevent his death. That is the entire plan?" "Yes, I expected theology." "Why?" "I am a priest. You are artillery certified." Meinhardt nodded. "Correct. The enemy eventually deployed something the dead could not easily fight. Silence. Not the absence of sound, the absence of meaning." A black sphere descended over the palace. Every prayer stopped. Every order failed. Vox transmissions became meaningless noise. Soldiers looked at officers without understanding rank. The dead began fading. Voss tried to speak. No words existed. He looked toward his regiment. They were disappearing, one by one, not dying, unbecoming. He reached for the wooden horse. The toy remained. A memory, reign, a sister, war, Krieg, duty, hold. Voss lifted his whistle. Sound had no meaning inside the sphere. He blew anyway. Nothing happened. Then one soldier raised his rifle. Sergeant Falk. He could not hear the whistle, but he remembered it. Another soldier fixed his bayonet. Then another. The gesture spread. Across the silent battlefield, thousands fixed bayonets without orders. Living guardsmen copied them. Space Marines copied them. Custodians lowered spears. The order did not need words. The regiment charged, meaning returned through action. The black sphere cracked. Sound exploded back into existence. Voss heard himself shouting, "Advance!" The enemy weapon shattered. The Krieg continued forward. Beyond the walls, the largest enemy formation yet was assembling. Millions. At its center walked something enormous. Not a demon prince, not a god. A throne-shaped darkness, carried by chains. Every demonic army bowed before it. Meinhardt stared. "What is that?" Voss magnified the image. The thing resembled a corpse seated upon a throne. A mockery, a reflection, an anti-emperor. Golden light died wherever it passed. St. Kharon appeared beside Voss. For the first time in millennia, the saint looked afraid. "That should not exist. Designation, I do not know." "Then assign one." Kharon stared. "The empty emperor." Voss nodded, hostile. "Colonel, you do understand that maybe something formed from 10,000 years of humanity's fear that the emperor has already died." "No." Kharon blinked. "You do not understand?" "Correct. You are not concerned. Understanding does not alter target priority." The empty emperor advanced. Every dead soldier trembled. The thing spoke without sound. "You have served a corpse," Voss answered through Vox. "Correct. He cannot save you. Not required. He used you. Expected. You died for nothing." Voss paused. Then, "We died under orders." The entity recoiled as though struck. Meinhardt stared at Voss. "That should not have hurt it." "Why?" "It is a psychic manifestation of despair." "Then despair is poorly prepared for Krieg." The empty emperor attacked. The battle killed the 143rd more times than all previous wars combined. The entity unmade soldiers by showing them the futility of their deaths. Troopers vanished, officers disappeared. Entire companies were erased by visions of an imperium that did not care they had existed. Voss saw Krieg itself, not heroic, not noble. A poisoned world manufacturing soldiers to die in wars decided by people who would never know their names. He saw commanders spend millions of lives for kilometers of mud. He saw bureaucrats lose casualty reports. He saw monuments built to generals while regiments vanished into numbers. The empty emperor whispered, "This is what you served." Voss watched. "Yes, no gratitude. Correct, no glory. Correct, no meaning." Voss looked at the vision. A wounded guardsman dragging another soldier toward cover. A medic refusing evacuation. A crew remaining inside a burning tank so they could fire one final shot. A civilian giving water to a stranger. A space marine standing alone in a doorway. Meaning did not come from the Imperium. It came from the person beside you. Voss raised his sword. "Incorrect." The vision shattered. Around him the regiment returned. Not because the Imperium remembered them, because they remembered one another. Adler, Falk, Meinhardt, Helmer, thousands of names, thousands of deaths. The 143rd had become its own witness. The empty emperor screamed. The golden throne answered. Light struck darkness. For a moment, Voss saw the true emperor, not the corpse, not the god. A man standing alone before an impossible future. Tired, angry, terrified, still refusing to stop. Voss understood him, not as deity, as soldier. The vision vanished. The 143rd charged. The empty emperor broke beneath 20,000 bayonets. When it died, every daemon on Terra screamed. The battle turned. Not immediately, not cleanly, but unmistakably. Enemy lines began to fail. The living defenders pushed outward. Ghost armies marched beside them. At the Eternity Wall, dead Cadians advanced, chanting that Cadia stood. At the Lion's Gate, fallen Astartes fought beside chapters, descended from their gene lines. Sisters of battle marched beside saints whose names they had only known from prayer books. Old Imperial army regiments from the Great Crusade appeared beneath banners untouched by 10,000 years. Even ancient thunder warriors were seen among the dead. One fought beside Sergeant Falk. The giant warrior looked at the Krieg soldier. "What legion?" "Imperial Guard." "Never heard of it." "Expected." "What happened to the Imperium?" Falk looked around. "Complicated." "Did we win?" Falk considered. "No." The Thunder Warrior laughed. "Good. Why?" "Means the fight's still on." Falk nodded. "Correct." They charged together. The final enemy withdrawal began at dawn. If dawn still had meaning on Terra, the sky was filled with burning ships. The palace was a ruin. Billions were dead. But the Golden Throne still shone. Voss stood atop the wall. His coat was torn. One arm was missing. He had not yet regenerated it. Major Adler approached. "Enemy retreat confirmed in 12 sectors. Pursue. Living commanders request consolidation." "Why?" "Casualty levels." Voss looked at him. "We do not have casualty limitations." "They do," Voss considered. "A weakness of living forces." "Approved. Dead units pursue. Living units consolidate." "Yes, Colonel." The 143rd advanced beyond the palace. They drove demons from the streets. They cleared tunnels. They retook batteries. They boarded enemy ships through impossible trenches that opened into void corridors. The Resolute Faith led a fleet of dead vessels. Ships lost at Cadia. Ships destroyed during the Gothic War. Ships from the Horus Heresy. Some had been missing for 10,000 years. They emerged around Terra like ghosts remembered by the stars. Enemy fleets broke. Hours later, the last major assault failed. The guns quieted. Voss stood in a crater outside the palace. Silence. Again. He hated silence. Private Helmer approached. "Colonel?" "Yes?" "Message." He handed over a paper dispatch. Voss read it. "Hostile forces withdrawing. Defensive objective achieved. Await further orders." Voss read the final sentence twice. "Await further orders." He looked toward the Golden Throne. The connection to the road remained, but weaker. The dead around him began turning transparent. Helmer noticed. "Colonel." "Yes." "Are we being relieved?" Voss did not answer. For the first time, he did not know. Major Adler arrived, then Meinhardt, then Falk. The four stood together. The regiment gathered behind them. 20,000 grey coats, some missing limbs, some burned, some almost entirely shadow. Voss opened a Vox channel to the throne room. 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment requesting clarification. Static. Repeat. Requesting clarification of orders. Nothing. Meinhardt looked toward the palace. "He may be unconscious." "Then we wait." Minutes passed. The regiment faded further. Living soldiers watched. Some saluted, others knelt. Word had spread. The ghost regiment was leaving. Voss looked at his men. For the first time in more than 10,000 years, there was no enemy in front of them. No line to hold, no assault to prepare, no artillery schedule, nothing. Sergeant Falk looked uncomfortable. "What happens now?" Voss glanced at him. "You are asking me." "Yes, Colonel. I do not know." This disturbed Falk more than any daemon. Confessor Meinhardt, removed his skull mask. Beneath it was darkness. Gray eyes. "We could rest." Nobody responded. The concept seemed obscene. Adler looked toward the horizon. "For how long?" Meinhardt almost smiled. "Perhaps forever," Adler considered. "That seems excessive." Voss looked at the wooden horse. Rain. A sister whose name he still could not remember. A world before duty. Perhaps rest existed. Perhaps there really was a field somewhere. Wheat beneath sunlight. A house. Someone waiting. He felt fear. Real fear. Not of death. They had mastered death. Of peace. Peace required becoming a person again. Voss was not certain he remembered how. The regiment continued fading. Then the Vox crackled. One final transmission. Weak. Almost inaudible. "Colonel." Voss raised the receiver. Receiving. The Emperor's voice. "Your regiment is relieved." No soldier moved. The sentence spread through the 143rd. Relieved. A word they had waited more than 10,000 years to hear. Voss felt the order release. The trench inside him became quiet. The artillery stopped. The darkness behind his mask softened. Around him, soldiers began disappearing. Not violently, not afraid. One by one. Trooper Helmer saluted. "Colonel." "Private." "Permission to stand down." Voss's voice almost failed. "Granted." Helmer vanished. Lieutenant Kruger disappeared beside a half-finished trench. He looked irritated that he could not complete it. Tank crews faded inside vehicles. Artillerymen placed shells down carefully before leaving. Officers saluted. Men whose names Voss had commanded for millennia passed beyond the road. Sergeant Falk remained. He looked toward Voss. "Colonel." "Yes. I think I know where I am going." "The field." "Yes. Report conditions if possible." Falk laughed. A real laugh. Then he saluted. "Permission to stand down." "Granted." He removed his respirator. For the first time, the darkness beneath it changed. A human face appeared. Old, scarred, tired, smiling. Then Sergeant Falk vanished. Major Adler remained. "So," he said. "So. An unusual campaign." "Yes. Would you change anything?" Voss considered all of it. The deaths, the trench, the road, the endless war. "No." Adler nodded. "Neither would I." He saluted. "Permission to stand down." Voss returned the salute. "Granted." Adler vanished. Only Meinhardt remained. The priest sat on a broken section of wall. "You know," he said, "I spent 10,000 years trying to determine what we were." "Did you succeed?" "No." "Then inefficient?" "Perhaps." He looked toward the pale horizon. "But I think I know what we became." "What?" "A promise." Voss waited. Meinhardt continued. "That someone would still be there when the dead were afraid." The colonel said nothing. The priest stood. "Permission to stand down." "Granted." Meinhardt disappeared. Voss stood alone. The 143rd was gone. The trenches faded. The artillery vanished. The resolute faith dissolved into starlight. St. Kharon's reach disappeared from terror. Only Colonel Erich Voss remained. The wooden horse rested in his hand. He looked toward the golden throne. "Lord." The Emperor answered faintly. "Yes." "The regiment is relieved." "Yes." "Am I?" Long silence. Voss almost expected another order. Another impossible front. Another eternity. Instead, the Emperor said, "You were relieved with them." Voss looked at the battlefield. "I see." He did not move. "Colonel." "Yes." "Why are you still here?" Voss considered. "I do not know where to go." The Emperor was silent for several seconds. Then the golden light around Terra changed. A road appeared. Not the road of the dead. A simple path. Grass on either side. rain falling softly. Voss froze. At the end stood a small house. Someone waited beneath the roof. A woman. No, a girl. She held another wooden toy. Memory returned. Her name, Lena, his sister. She had died during a training accident when he was 9. Voss had forgotten because Krieg taught its children to turn grief into duty. Lena waved. Erich. He removed his respirator. For the first time in 10,000 years, he had a face. Not darkness, not gray lights. A human face, scarred, older than it should have been. Tears moved across it. He touched them in confusion. Behind him, the Emperor spoke one last time. You held. Voss looked back. Yes, enough. The colonel saluted. Then he turned toward the rain. He walked, one step, then another. The battlefield disappeared behind him. The weight of the pistol vanished. The greatcoat became lighter. His boots no longer carried mud. He reached the house. Lena looked exactly as he remembered. "You're late," she said. Voss considered the statement. "Traffic," she laughed. He finally understood why people did that. Then, Colonel Erich Voss, commanding officer of the 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment, stepped out of the war. On Terra, the living rebuilt. Years passed, then centuries. Historians argued over what had happened during the final siege. Some claimed the ghost soldiers had been psychic projections. Others called them Imperial saints. The ecclesiarchy declared the story symbolic. The administratum searched for records of the 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment. It found almost none. A deployment order, a casualty list, one final communication from Ashara. Hold St. Kharon's reach. No relief order had ever been transmitted. The regiment was officially listed as missing. A clerk attempted to correct the record. He entered 143rd Krieg Siege Regiment. Status: destroyed. The cogitator rejected the entry. He tried again. Rejected. He entered. Status: deceased. Rejected. He entered. Status: active. The system accepted it. The clerk stared at the screen, then shrugged. Administratum systems were ancient. He moved to the next file. Far beneath the Imperial Palace, in a forgotten ammunition chamber that had not existed before the final siege, a single brass whistle rested on a wooden table. Beside it lay a Death Corps respirator. No one knew how they had arrived there. Custodians eventually discovered the chamber. They sealed it, not because they feared what was inside, because carved into the wall were 21,983 names. At the bottom was one sentence: hold until relieved. Years later, during a crisis on a distant frontier world, an Astra Militarum regiment found itself surrounded. No reinforcements, no ammunition, no escape. Their colonel transmitted a final message. "We will hold," the Vox answered. Static, then a voice, faint, almost amused. "Good." The colonel froze. "Identify." No response. Then the ground behind his position began to change. Mud spread across dry stone. Barbed wire emerged from nothing. An ammunition crate appeared beside an empty gun. On its lid rested a small wooden horse. The colonel stared at it. Far away, somewhere beyond war, rain fell on a quiet field. And for the first time in more than 10,000 years, Colonel Erich Voss did not hear the guns. But the Imperium still remembered the lesson his regiment had carved into death itself. A soldier could die, a regiment could disappear, a world could fall, records could be lost, names could be forgotten, but an order, held with enough conviction, could outlive flesh, and somewhere in the darkest places between the stars, where demons hunted the souls of the dead and impossible things waited beyond the edge of creation, there remained one truth whispered with fear. If humanity had been ordered to hold a line, someone from Krieg might still be there.